It is 8 a.m. on the 13th of June 1931 and a woman approaches a polling station, her eyes widening as she enters the schoolhouse. She looks nervously at the officials as they hand her a polling card. She is about to be a part of the first election in a British territory outside the settler colonies, where one person gets one vote. And it is happening right here, in the island of Ceylon. This is episode 1 of Sri Lanka, a history of power in paradise. On the 12th of April 2022, when Sri Lanka announced a first ever default on its external debt, people were already facing hardship and rising living costs, leaving us all wondering why. So, Patta History told you the story of how Sri Lanka's economy became what it is today and why it plunged into crisis. But as we learned, behind economics is almost always politics. So, are you curious about who has power, how they got it, and what they use it for? Have you ever wondered about the system of government, what it does, and more importantly, what it's supposed to do? And even more importantly, what role do we, the citizens, have in this system? Well, we were curious too. For the next 3 weeks, we will journey through Sri Lanka's politics, hoping, as we always do, that by looking farther back, we may see further forward. Geographically well-positioned Ceylon has always attracted foreign traders. Many a trading ship blown off its intended course has discovered a convenient port of call at Ceylon. In its mystical interior, they unearth gemstones, forests full of spices, and a pleasant climate in which to grow things. So naturally, 3 European trading powers, first the Kingdom of Portugal, then the Dutch East India Company, took control of the island's production and trading, except of course the Highland Kingdom of Kandy, which had managed to stay independent. The Dutch appointed governors to control the country's affairs, and the governor reported to the Supreme Government of Batavia, modern-day Jakarta. A political council of Dutchmen advised the governor and kept him informed of local customs, incidents, and events. In the late 18th century, when the British take over, they implement a nearly identical system. So, the governor, appointed by the British Crown and backed by the British East India Company's extensive military resources, held authority as the modern-day Bhupati, or Lord of the Land. He also benefited from Rajakarya, or King's work, which supplied him with caste-based services from the Ceylonese, while also collecting taxes from the people. But the British were different in 2 important ways. First, they acquired control of the Kingdom of Kandy from its aristocracy, who ceded the territory in trust. The symbol of this trust was the sacred tooth relic of the Buddha. Buddhists believed that possession of the sacred relic gave the bearer a legitimate right to the island's throne. Once this was done, the British also took a particular interest in the island's administration. The governor had to find a way to work with a network of village headmen to secure cooperation of the island's older Sinhalese, Tamil, and many other communities who had inhabited the island for centuries. These groups included the Moors, merchants from India, plantation laborers, and European plantation owners. Each managed their affairs slightly differently, under different authorities, with some even observing their own legal codes. This led to a few experiments on how to govern the country. The British had constructed roads, schools, hospitals, and post offices. They had implemented health initiatives and conducted extensive land surveys. Though some work was completed, a hefty civil service remained, and now Ceylon is almost unmanageably expensive. So, our story begins in 1829 with the arrival of a lawyer named Charles Hay Cameron and his compatriot William Colebrook. They have been tasked with reporting on and recommending improvements to the state of laws, finances, and administration of the British settlements in the Cape of Good Hope and Mauritius. When their ship blows off course and they find themselves in Ceylon, the government in Whitehall, London, decides to make use of them. Meanwhile, Ceylon is on its 9th British governor in 40 years. Each has had varying degrees of success in making Ceylon productive and profitable, while Whitehall has made some attempts to curb their power and take it out of deficit. Then, a wind of liberal change sweeps through British politics as the Liberal Party starts expanding the franchise, granting people the right to vote for their own representatives. Cameron and Colebrook are sympathetic to these ideas. They stay for over 4 years and publish 2 reports. Among their many recommendations are 3 radical ones that would evolve into Sri Lanka's system of governance. First, abolish the caste system. Second, admit qualified Ceylonese to higher positions in the Ceylon civil service. And third, establish an executive and legislative council with official and unofficial members to co-govern with the governor. While the first was unlikely and the second somewhat feasible, the third was sticky, as it would reduce the governor to a figurehead. Unsurprisingly, Governor Edward Barnes and his successor, Governor Horton, vehemently opposed what they viewed as far too drastic a change. But Whitehall proceeds. What started as a colonial cost-cutting exercise and a check on the governor's authority evolves into a century-long struggle to balance the power of a single executive with institutions. And in 1833, the Ceylon Legislative Council is established. By 1835, 6 of the council's 15 members are unofficial, men hand-picked by the governor, who eventually come to represent Europeans, Burghers, Sinhalese and Tamils. The governor now needs the advice and consent of this legislative council constitutionally, making it a part of the legal and political rules of governing Ceylon. And this was the beginnings of the Parliament of Sri Lanka. We will check throughout our story on how this institution evolves. How it goes from 15 members to 49, from a minority of communal or native representatives to a majority, from this communal group being a single block to representing different races and territories, from appointed members to elected representatives, and from having very little say to a much bigger responsibility on how the country was run. Would it become the institution through which the people of Ceylon could govern themselves? If you have watched our 4-part series on Ceylonese independence, you will recognize the 3 influences which start destabilizing British rule that appear and reappear continuously in Sri Lanka's history. A British land grab to promote plantation agriculture, coupled with a massive rise in taxes, has upset the rural economy. In 1847, Britain's economy goes into crisis, while Ceylon is in deep deficit. European plantation owners have resisted most attempts at direct taxation of their income, pleading poverty because of a slower trade in coffee. So, Governor Torrington imposes the bulk of new taxes, paid indirectly, meaning not from income, but from spending or possessions on the natives. The natives see this as a depletion of cultivable land on the one hand and an increase in absurdly levied taxes, even on the ownership of pets or jewelry on the other. To add to the pain of mostly Sinhalese peasantry and the irritation of Kandyan elites, they were excluded from the benefits of the plantation trade. If you remember the terms of the Kandyan Convention, whoever possessed the sacred tooth relic was entrusted with protecting Buddhism, its rituals and places of worship. But the British are under pressure from 2 influences of their own. Anglican missionaries argue that the Crown has no business prioritizing any other religion, while the Colebrook Cameron reforms are separately calling for religious neutrality. The British then make a mistake. They try to hand back the sacred symbol. The Kandyan aristocracy is insulted, excluded from the new economy and overburdened with taxes. Now this? A betrayal of a solemn undertaking. These grievances culminate in the bloody Matale Rebellion of 1848, which you can watch in our Veerapuranappu series. After tensions ease, the British swiftly try to correct this faux pas and go back to a fuzzy policy of religious neutrality while also providing state patronage for Buddhism. This was the emergence of the first influence, Buddhist nationalism. During this time, the Ceylonese, especially the Sinhalese, Tamil and Muslim communities had their own caste systems which determined their status and role when serving ruling elites. Upper caste men were reluctant to share power with those of lower caste, even if they were Ceylonese, so they maintained loyalty to the British. Secondly, race also started playing a bigger role, and this was complex. Internal divisions like caste meant the Sinhalese did corral themselves into a representative bloc, despite outnumbering the Tamil and Muslim communities. But Sir Ponnambalam Ramanathan, an upper caste Tamil, was further along. As an unofficial member of the Legislative Council, he makes a speech in 1885 arguing that Ceylon Moors were members of the Tamil race converted to Islam. This sparks outrage among the Ceylon Moors, who see it as a cynical attempt to counterbalance the Sinhalese and dominate the Moors' own political agenda. But the lobbying by upper caste men continues, and they try to include more people from adjacent backgrounds. In 1888, they form a club of landowners, professionals and elites of the Sinhalese Govi castes, powerful members of the Karava caste and a few members of the Tamil Vellala caste into a loose confederation called the Ceylon National Association. This group asks for constitutional gradualism, which is marginally more power than they already have, while staying mostly loyal to the British. But very soon, there was a much more stirring platform for change. The colonial government introduced easily accessible liquor, leading to widespread drunkenness. Local businessmen paid as much as £60,000 in auctions for the rights to produce and sell alcohol in a single territory. The problem had become so bad that a British road builder, Major Thomas Skinner, observed, "I have known districts of the population of which, some years ago, not 1 in 100 could be induced to take spirits, where drunkenness now prevails to such an extent that the villagers have known to have to pawn their crops upon the ground to tavern keepers for arrack." And so begins the temperance movement, opposing state-sponsored alcoholism. It is first led by Christian evangelicals and then by Buddhist figures, the most visible of whom was Anagarika Dharmapala. The temperance movement revives and gives purpose to Sinhalese Buddhism in politics, marking the first time the Sinhalese have asserted their values and culture to the British colonizer at a national level. So those wanting reform are now split into two groups: the constitutional gradualists, who wanted change within the British framework, and the nationalists, who organized larger grassroots groups united by the temperance movement. But the Sinhalese elite, including those who profited from alcohol, understood the potential of temperance to unite Sinhalese across castes. In an irony that would echo through Ceylon's history, privileged Sinhalese leaders like DS and FR Senanayaka, who made some of their money in taverns, throw their support behind the temperance movement. Discontent is brewing, taking on both religious and national identity, and it is being leveraged by a second influence: the educated elites of Ceylon. Meanwhile, colonies like Jamaica, Trinidad and Mauritius have made progress at least by plantation-owning whites. They have their own councils and even veto powers over colonial government spending. But progress is slow in Ceylon. In 1908, James Pearce, a Colombo Municipal Council member who led the successful campaign to abolish the paddy tax, writes to the governor. He asks why Ceylon couldn't elect its own representatives when India and even islands smaller than Colombo were given this right. He argues that only people who had colonial education would be suitably qualified to vote. This is opposed by Governor Sir Henry Macallum, who believed the elites did not represent the majority of Ceylon. But pressure builds, and Secretary of State for the colonies, the Earl of Crewe, allows educated Ceylonese to vote in members to the Legislative Council. So, in 1911, Sir Ponnambalam Ramanathan becomes the first Ceylonese appointed to the council this way, defeating the Sinhalese Karava caste member, Marcus Fernando. Sir Ponnambalam's high caste contributes substantially to his victory. But there is danger on the horizon. 1915 is significant. The year marks the centenary of the Kandyan Convention in March, Ceylon's National Day in April, and the Buddhist Vesak festival in May. There have been months of minor incidences of discontent between the growing trading community of Indian coast Moors and the Sinhalese. A noise ordinance prevents Buddhist processions, known as Perahera, from beating drums without a license. But just after midnight on the 29th of May, members of a procession passing a mosque in Kandy get into a fight with a group of coast Moors. The escalation is horrific. A riot breaks out in Kandy with men and women attacking and razing bazaar shops to the ground. The British response is at first inept, and the violence escalates. The country burns for 9 days. Then the British respond, declaring martial law. The riots are treated as a Sinhalese conspiracy to overthrow them, and they arrest several prominent leaders of the temperance movement, including the Senanayaka brothers. Several men are shot in the streets. What follows is a pivotal moment in the colonial struggle. The state has shown that it will meet violence with even more violence. The Moors of Ceylon are now a target for unabated hostility, and prominent Ceylonese elites are evolving into symbols of the freedom struggle. In the Legislative Council, Sir Ponnambalam Ramanathan gives a series of impassioned speeches defending those assassinated and imprisoned without charge. What national emergency was there for suspending the constitutional safeguards of life and property and exposing innocent people to the dangers of military despotism? He even travels to Britain together with E.W. Pereira to present a petition against Governor Robert Chalmers, who is eventually recalled. Meanwhile, in India, Mahatma Gandhi has returned from South Africa and is setting an example to oppose British rule by staging satyagraha, or civil disobedience. This further emboldens the radicals of Ceylon and inspires the youth of Jaffna. With the 1915 anti-Moor pogrom serving as an ugly marker, elites are hardened into the first political party called the Ceylon National Congress. The CNC asks for responsible government. They seek control over the legislature, which enacts the laws of the land, control over the budget, and the ability to appoint the country's leader. But, as always, bringing people as diverse as the Ceylonese together is a challenge. Enter Sir William Manning. Seeing easy divisions to be exploited within the Congress Party, Governor Manning seeks to stall the momentum towards independence. He appeals to Kandyan's aspirations for self-government and supports Tamil's demands for greater representation. Then, in 1920, two important changes are made to the way Ceylon is governed. First, the Legislative Council gets more oversight over government revenue and spending. Then, territorial or geographic-based representation is introduced across 11 constituencies, alongside communal or race-based representation, reducing the number of Sinhalese representatives. Unhappy at this state of affairs, the Sinhalese members of the CNC, through the newly established Lanka Mahajana Sabha, lobby for further reform of the council. In 1923, the council is expanded from 37 to 49 and is restructured. Of these 37 unofficial members, only 8 are appointed by the governor and 29 are allocated from territories. This is a setback for minorities, as now the Sinhalese outnumber them. The CNC is facing its first big challenge, and it is a racial one. At the 1921 Legislative Council election, Sir Ponnambalam Arunachalam, brother of Sir Ponnambalam Ramanathan, requests that the seat of Colombo be allocated to him. D.S. Senanayake calls him an egoist who had an exaggerated sense of his own self-importance and opposes the request, arguing that it would give into communal representation. Sir Ponnambalam withdraws from the election and leaves the CNC, which he co-founded. Identity politics is now firmly established in the now 49-member Legislative Council of Ceylon. By now, if the British were suspicious of these well-spoken, English-educated Ceylonese, there is a new movement taking shape which they fear even more. This brings us to the third powerful force in Ceylonese politics, Labour. As Britain industrialized, workers demanded more rights and better working conditions, and these ideas were exported to her colonies. A.E. Gunasinghe begins leading the left-wing cause. In 1922, he founds the island's first trade union, the Ceylon Labour Union, and starts rapidly expanding it. He organizes labour across multiple industries, from railways to harbour workers, into a series of strikes, and eventually forms the Ceylon Labour Party. The Labour Party's demands far exceed that of the Congress and include universal suffrage, the right for every Ceylonese to vote regardless of education, race, sex, caste or status. Seizing this opportunity, in a well-worn political tradition, D.S. Senanayake uses the emergence of worrying left-wing politics to scare the Brits and positions himself and the CNC as the less radical alternative. With so much complexity, Britain decides to look into matters themselves. So, on a cool November morning in 1927, a Crown Commission of 3 Labour Party members, chaired by the Earl of Donoughmore, arrive in the island. Their mission? Investigate the various agitations and draft a new constitution to meet the needs of all the groups resident on this troublesome little colony. They interviewed 140 people and held 34 sessions, and no one could be ignored. Agnes de Silva, a prominent women's suffragette, would make sure of it. The Commission's recommendations cause outrage. The CNC lambasts it as an outside imposition on what they see as the natural evolution of the Legislative Council, complaining bitterly about recommending universal suffrage, especially to estate workers. Upper caste men are upset that lower caste women will get the vote, and the Jaffna Youth Congress oppose anything short of the British leaving the country altogether. The only person who is remotely happy is A.E. Gunasinghe. And a humble flower seller will change everything very soon. Catch us next Sunday on Patta History as we uncover what is next in store for Ceylon in the second episode of our three-part series on Sri Lanka, a history of power in paradise. Meanwhile, what similarities do you see between politics of today's Sri Lanka and that of over 100 years ago? Comment below.